When Emily came back, I stumbled across a question on Quora. What's it like to marry someone you don't love? It was answered by Alex. He didn't post anonymously, and his profile picture was still the one with Emily. A shot of their backs together. His response began. Life feels like a stagnant pool of water. I don't love my wife. After breaking up with my first love, my family pressured me to marry quickly. At the time, I was disheartened and felt that, as long as it wasn't her, it didn't matter who I married. My wife had always liked me, and we'd known each other for a long time. Since I trusted her, I proposed. I still remember how happy she was that day, crying tears of joy and repeatedly asking if she was dreaming. Honestly, I've always felt guilty. Over the years, she's devoted herself wholeheartedly to me, taking care of every big and small matter at home. My fingers trembled slightly as I scrolled further. But I don't love her. For all these years, my heart has been stuck on my first love. I know it's a terrible thing to say. I used to love her. But now, I just can't let go. Someone commented under his post. You're not anonymous. Aren't you afraid your wife will see this and divorce you? His reply was calm and unwavering. She won't. She can't live without me. Those words pierced me like an old thorn buried in my chest. Over time, the sharpness had dulled, but the lingering ache was still impossible to ignore. I let out a bitter laugh. Look at that. He knows me so well. Even now, he's confident I wouldn't leave him. That evening, Alex acted like everything was normal. We behaved like a polite, respectful couple. He complimented my cooking out of routine and then turned over in bed to scroll through his phone. Our king-sized bed wasn't huge, but somehow, lying back to back, there was still an unbridgeable chasm between us. My thoughts drifted back to the day he proposed. He thought my tears were from joy, but he never realized my heart was full of sorrow. Alex had been with Emily for 7 years. From the age of 17 to 24, they shared the best years of their lives, growing from naive teens into mature adults together. After college, Emily wanted to pursue further studies abroad and got into her dream school. But Alex's father was gravely ill at the time, and he had to stay and take over the family business. Long-distance relationships rarely end well. At first, they tried to make it work, but as the physical distance grew, so did the problems. The time difference left them with fewer opportunities to communicate. And Alex, overwhelmed by the demands of his new role, was always too busy. Emily, alone in a foreign country, found that whenever she needed him, he was never there. Their arguments became more frequent, and after a year, one particularly heated fight led Emily to break things off impulsively. That could have been salvageable, but both of them were too proud. Neither wanted to back down. Alex, already grieving his father's death, was too distraught to fight for their relationship, and eventually, they drifted apart. But I've always known that he never truly let go of Emily. When he proposed to me, I knew he didn't love me. He was just overwhelmed and wanted to check the box on marriage. I happened to be the most convenient option, good on paper and willing to say yes. I understood all of this. The saddest part was that even knowing the truth, I couldn't stop myself from accepting his proposal. That day, I cried so much that I couldn't stop. He thought I was crying tears of joy, but in reality, it was heartbreak. I knew he didn't love me, and yet, I couldn't help but love him. I don't know whether it was intentional or not, but right after Emily came back, the class president organized a college reunion. It had been 3 years since we last saw each other. Emily was even more beautiful than before. She wore a Morandi-tone long dress, her long hair cascading naturally over her shoulders. She exuded an effortless elegance and grace. Yet Alex, from the moment he walked in, didn't glance at her even once. Instead, he stayed by my side, attentively placing food on my plate. At home, he never once peeled shrimp for me, but now he carefully placed one into my bowl. His voice soft and tender. Eat more, he said with a smile. Across the table, Emily's hand paused mid-air, her smile slowly fading. I couldn't help but find the situation ironic. In this performance that seemed to revolve around 3 people, the 2 of them were the stars, pouring their hearts into their roles, while I stood off stage, a pitiful clown watching silently. As the drinks flowed, a balding, tipsy classmate leaned toward Emily with a drunken grin. Emily, How come you've gotten even prettier? Are you seeing anyone now? If not, how about giving me a chance? Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Alex stiffen. Emily smiled politely. No, I'm not seeing anyone. But I don't think we'd be a good match. Why not? The bald man, clearly embarrassed by her rejection, grew irritated and let his mouth run unchecked. Don't tell me you're still pining for Alex. Waiting to stay pure for him? He's married now. Let me tell you something. Once a woman's over 25, it's tough to find someone. You still think you're some kind of goddess. Emily's smile faltered. You've had too much to drink, she said coldly. Another classmate, a woman enjoying the drama, pulled out her phone. Maybe there's more to it than meets the eye, she said, grinning. I remember scrolling through Quora and seeing Alex answer a question about what it's like to marry someone you don't love. Isn't this photo of him and Emily? She turned the screen toward the group. Emily, don't you still have this photo in your profile? At the mention of gossip, everyone pulled out their phones to look. Even Emily froze when she saw the answer. Her gaze became complicated as she looked at Alex, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Alex met her gaze. My whole body went cold, trembling so hard I could barely stay still. In front of everyone, the truth was laid bare. My husband loved another woman. For a moment, I felt stripped bare, exposed under glaring lights. The humiliation made me want to flee immediately. After a long silence, Alex finally spoke. His voice was steady, though if you listen closely, there was a faint tremor beneath it. I just made that up. My wife and I are doing fine. Let's focus on the meal. The classmates nodded and put their phones away. But the mood had already shifted. Throughout the rest of the dinner, I could feel countless glances directed our way. The ones aimed at me carried nothing but pity and ridicule. It was, without a doubt, the most painful meal I had ever endured. As the gathering wound down, Alex excused himself to go to the restroom. Shortly after, Emily left as well. Several people glanced at me, their looks intentional, almost expectant. I no longer knew what to feel. I kept my head down and continued eating mechanically, pretending nothing had happened. When the reunion ended and everyone else had left, I waited for a long time, but Alex didn't return. Finally, I stood up and walked out. But as I passed through the hallway, I suddenly heard Emily's tearful voice. From the shadows, I saw Emily clinging to Alex from behind, her voice choked with emotion. You still care about me. I know you do. Alex frowned. You're overthinking. I'm married now. Tears streamed down Emily's face. Then why won't you even look at me? What about that answer you posted? Alex, you don't love her. You never have. His voice dropped. I know this isn't right, but we were together first. If it hadn't been for her, maybe we'd already be back together. Emily's voice trembled. I came back for you. I was the one who didn't know better before. Can't we start over? Alex stood frozen, his expression unreadable in the dim light. After what felt like an eternity, he slowly turned around and pulled Emily into his arms. They kissed fiercely, as if trying to release all the emotions they'd suppressed over the years. And I stood there, silently watching, letting the blades of betrayal tear through my heart. I don't know why. It was them being intimate. Yet I was the one who fled in a panic. By the time I stopped under a dim streetlight, I absently reached up to touch my face and realized it was already wet and icy cold. I didn't even know when I had started crying. That night, Alex came home very late. He seemed like he wanted to explain something, opening his mouth to speak but unable to find the words. I smiled, as I always did, and said, "Get some rest. Whatever it is, we can talk about it later." He let out a visible sigh of relief, the tension easing from his brow. When I picked up my blanket and went to the guest room, he didn't stop me, not for a second. Late at night, I opened Quora. The number of comments under Alex's answer had grown significantly, likely from the classmates who witnessed tonight's spectacle. His last response was still the same. She won't. She can't live without me. The night outside was hazy and dim, the mist blurring the view beyond the window. A soft breeze blew the sheer curtains, making them billow gently. I sat up, opened the drawer, and pulled out a divorce agreement. Over the years, Alex hadn't loved me, but he'd been a decent husband in other ways. Every penny of his salary and bonuses had been handed over to me. In the past year, he'd even started to change. He'd kiss me before leaving for work. And during our more intimate moments, he'd whisper my name softly, tenderly. On nights when my cramps were unbearable, he would warm his hands and massage my stomach. More than once, I woke up in the middle of the night to find him nodding off, his head bobbing with exhaustion, but his hands never stopped their soothing motions. Back then, I thought maybe, just maybe, he would come to love me. But when Emily came back, I realized it had all been a delusion. I divided the money we'd saved over the years into 2 equal parts, signed my name on the divorce papers, and quietly placed them on the coffee table. Then, I dragged my suitcase to the door, gently closed it behind me, and left. Before going to bed, I added a comment under Alex's answer. No, he can leave. Alex didn't call until the following afternoon. He'd likely been too busy entwined with Emily to notice the divorce agreement I left behind until just then. What do you mean by this? His voice was laced with suppressed anger. Shun, are you trying to divorce me? I paused before answering, my tone calm. Yes. Sign the papers. Let me know when you're free so we can finalize it. You don't need to worry. I didn't take anything extra. The house and car are still yours. Before I could finish, Alex cut me off, his voice sharp and filled with irritation. Enough. You're being ridiculous. Is this because of last night? You're really making a big deal out of nothing. His tone carried a hint of mockery. You're mad because of that answer, aren't you? Sure. Writing it was wrong. But haven't I told you before? I hate being threatened. Do you really think this will? I interrupted him, my voice trembling. I'm serious. Alex. I took a shaky breath, fighting the sting in my nose. Last night, in the hallway, I saw you too. Alex fell silent, momentarily at a loss for words. Then he stammered, clearly flustered. It's not what you think. Listen to me. Tears welled up, and my voice broke. Alex, what were you feeling when you wrote that answer? When you trampled on my feelings? Did you look at me like I was some kind of joke? Like I was just a fool? Is loving you really so worthless to you? For once, Alex seemed genuinely panicked. He stuttered. That's not what I meant. I was drunk that day. I just wrote something random. Shun, please don't overthink this. Overthink? I forced a bitter smile. You made it perfectly clear. What's left for me to overthink? I lifted my head, refusing to let the tears fall. Alex, let's get a divorce. On the other end of the line, Alex was adamant, refusing to agree. Just think about it some more, he said, over and over. I didn't care anymore. If it came to that, I could just file for divorce myself. Worst case, 2 years of separation would finalize it anyway. It would just mean enduring a little longer. I could tolerate Alex not loving me, but I couldn't stand him trampling all over my feelings like this. As if things weren't bad enough. A few days later, it started pouring while I was on my way home from work. The visibility was terrible, and when the car in front of us suddenly slowed down, the taxi I was in rear-ended it. The laptop I was holding slammed into my abdomen, and my forehead hit the window hard. Pain exploded through me, and everything went dark as a loud ringing filled my ears. When I was taken to the hospital, the doctor frowned after examining me. You're pregnant. You need to be more careful. Your body already shows signs of a threatened miscarriage. You nearly lost the baby. I froze. Pregnant? Seeing my stunned expression, the doctor raised an eyebrow. Don't tell me you didn't know you were pregnant? I nodded slowly, reaching out in a daze to touch my abdomen. It was flat, with no indication of life inside. And yet, there it was, a tiny being connected to me by blood. My mind felt like a tangled mess, and I bit my lip hard. This was fate playing a cruel joke. For years, I had wanted a child with Alex. I had thought that having a baby might be the key to keeping him close to me. I used to beg him, plead with him, until he got so frustrated that he snapped. Do you even have any shame? Acting like this. Even then, I hadn't succeeded in getting pregnant. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. Now, when we were about to divorce, the baby had come, completely out of place. The pain in my head throbbed. I felt nauseous. After a checkup, the doctor said, You might have a concussion. You'll need to stay in the hospital for observation. Also, someone needs to be here to help you out. Have your family pay the fees when they arrive." I hesitated before sending Alex a message. When he didn't reply, I called him. It was embarrassing, especially after making such a firm declaration about wanting a divorce. But I was alone in this city, far from my family, with no one else to turn to. The phone rang for a long time before he picked up. In the background, I could hear faint music and chatter, suppressing the pounding in my head. I spoke softly. "Alex, can you come to the hospital? I was in a car accident." His voice was cold. "Shun, can you come up with a better excuse? I mean, really, didn't you just say yesterday that you wanted a divorce? And now you're calling me already." I opened my mouth to explain, but he interrupted me. "You were so tough yesterday, weren't you? And now what? You regret it already." In the background, I heard Emily's voice. "Alex, come on, hurry up." Before hanging up, Alex sneered. "Shun, I really can't stand you." Then there was nothing but the cold, monotonous tone of a disconnected line. I stared at my phone blankly, feeling like my heart had stopped beating altogether. The pain in my head and abdomen seemed to fade, leaving only the dull ache in my chest. A delayed but devastating blow. The doctor broke the silence. "You'll need to get a progesterone injection to protect the pregnancy. But honestly, your condition is already precarious. If this continues, it will be hard to keep the baby." I lifted my head slowly and said, almost as if to myself, "I don't need it. I don't want this child." The doctor hesitated. "You're saying you want to terminate the pregnancy?" After a long pause, I nodded. My tongue felt bitter and numb, but I forced myself to say the words. "Yes." I decided to terminate the pregnancy, since I wasn't in great condition. The doctor scheduled the procedure for the next day. Before the surgery, I picked up my phone and saw a post from Emily on her social media. In the high-rise revolving restaurant owned by a television station, she was in front of a birthday cake, making a wish. Alex sat beside her, looking at her with a warm, gentle smile. The caption read, "May you be by my side every year from now on." A sharp pain radiated from my lower abdomen, spreading through my body and making my limbs feel weak. I couldn't help but bend over slightly, clutching the edge of the hospital bed for support. No wonder he didn't come to be with me. He was celebrating Emily's birthday. Of course, the birthday of the woman he loves is far more important than the well-being of a wife he doesn't care about. The doctor approached me. "You haven't signed the consent form yet. Is your family member coming?" My eyes felt dry, even though they stung as if tears were ready to fall. But no tears came. Maybe I'd already cried them all out. I opened my mouth and said quietly, "I don't have any family here. I'll sign it myself." The procedure wasn't a major surgery. Once the anesthesia took effect, there was no pain at all. Even when I got off the operating table, I didn't feel much, but I couldn't shake the emptiness, as if a part of me had vanished. With the car accident and now the miscarriage, I took half a month off work to recover at home. Once I started feeling a little better, I went out to buy groceries, hoping to cook something for myself to pass the time. I needed to stay busy, or the void would swallow me whole. I went to a supermarket I used to frequent. While choosing beef, a sharp, grating voice came from behind me. "Isn't this Shen? You're grocery shopping too." I turned around to see Emily holding Alex's arm, her smile full of feigned innocence. "Why are you alone?" I didn't want to say a single word to her and turned to leave, but before I could take a step, someone grabbed my wrist. Alex's gaze fell on the bandage around my leg. His brows furrowed. "You're hurt," I replied with a mocking tone. "You already forgot? How impressive." "Alex, so young and already suffering from memory loss." Alex froze for a moment, looking taken aback. "I thought you were lying to me that day." I laughed bitterly. "Of course. You were busy celebrating someone's birthday. Why would you have time to care? But it doesn't matter now. We're getting divorced. Whoever you want to be with is none of my business." His frown deepened as he looked at me with suppressed frustration. I had never spoken to him like this before. Maybe he felt guilty, as he forced himself to explain. "It's not what you think." I yanked my hand out of his grip and said coldly, "Get lost." "Alex, Hearing you talk makes me sick. I didn't want to see his face any longer, so I turned and left. I could feel his gaze burning into my back, but he didn't say another word. That evening, I received a message from Alex. It had been a long time since he'd sent me anything. Scrolling through our chat history, it was almost entirely messages from me. Will you be home for dinner tonight? I made your favorite sweet and sour pork. I saw a stray cat on the street today. Its eyes looked a bit like yours. Haha. The last message was from the day I was at the hospital. I was in a car accident. Can you come be with me? He never replied to that one. He left me singing a pathetic solo all by myself. But today, for once, he sent me a message. Emily said no one was there to celebrate her birthday when she returned to the country, so I went to keep her company. There's nothing going on between us. Don't misunderstand. Alex said. I wasn't sure what had gotten into him, but for the first time, he seemed to soften his stance. It was wrong of me not to go to the hospital that day. It won't happen again. I suddenly found it laughable. Everything about being with Alex felt like a mistake. The person was wrong. The timing was wrong. Everything was wrong. When I wanted a child, no matter how hard I tried, it never happened. But now, as we were heading for a divorce, the child had come, only for me to have to give it up. I had waited so long for his explanation, but it never came. And now that I didn't need it anymore, he was offering it to me. How absurd. It seemed we were never meant to be together. I had forced it before, and now I was finally tasting the bitter fruit of my stubbornness. Few days later, Alex called me again, this time in the middle of the night. His voice was hoarse, tinged with suppressed pain and impatience. Where did you put my stomach medicine? Years ago, when he was busy with work, his erratic eating habits had left him with a severe stomach condition. I had always been careful to manage it for him. Every meal was prepared by me, with ingredients chosen specifically for his condition. Besides his Western medicine, he also relied on a traditional herbal remedy. One of the ingredients was hard to source, so I used to fly to a specific herbalist every 3 months to restock, carefully measuring and preparing it for him every day. Now that I was gone, no one was there to stand by the stove for hours brewing his medicine. His stomach must have flared up again. I've already used it up, I replied flatly. Alex paused for a moment, then spoke again, his voice tinged with frustration. Why didn't you go get more? This time, just stock up. For all the years we were together, I never once let him go without his medicine, unless the doctor advised against it. Even in the freezing depths of winter, I'd board a plane at dawn and wait outside the herbalist shop at 4 a.m. to make sure I could get it in time. But now? On what grounds did he think he could ask me for this? Are you out of your mind? I said coldly. Go ask Emily to get it for you. Before he could respond, I hung up and blocked him on every platform. I thought that would be the end of it. But the next day, after work, Alex was waiting for me. He stood by the side of the road in a black trench coat, looking like a model from a fashion shoot. My coworkers couldn't help but glance at him, whispering and pointing excitedly. I froze for a moment, then frowned. When we were together, I used to imagine him picking me up from work, but he had always refused, unwilling to be seen with me in public. And now, when we were about to get divorced, what was the point of this? As soon as Alex saw me, he strode over and grabbed my arm. His expression was displeased. Why did you hang up on me last night? I looked at him. He seemed genuinely confused, almost annoyed. It was as if, all along, I had been the only one taking this seriously, the only one caught in this tangled mess. He had always stood on the outside, detached. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, followed by a deep, inexplicable disgust. I shook his hand off forcefully. We're getting divorced. I don't think we need to talk anymore, I said coldly. Alex frowned. We're not divorced yet. Are you still mad about Emily? I already told you. There's nothing between us. Can you stop being so unreasonable? I stared at the man I had loved for so many years, and suddenly my chest was flooded with a burning anger. Even now, he called her Emily, so intimately, insisting there was nothing between them, and accusing me of being unreasonable. Did he truly not understand why I was angry? Did he not know that he shouldn't say things like this? No, Alex was far too smart for that. He knew exactly what to say and when to say it, especially in his professional life. The truth was, he didn't care. He saw me as nothing more than a loyal dog. No matter how he hurt me, insulted me, or abandoned me, he thought I'd always wag my tail and stay by his side, unwilling to leave. To him, I wasn't worth even a shred of genuine effort. The fire of rage roared inside me, burning away all my reason. I could no longer hold it in. I slapped him across the face, hard and without hesitation. The sound echoed sharply, and Alex's head turned to the side from the force. He froze in place, wide-eyed with shock, unable to react. Just then, Emily walked up from behind him, her brows furrowed. "Alex, what are you doing here?" she asked, then turned to me. Her expression shifted to one of smug disdain, and her voice carried a mocking tone. "Shun, can you stop pestering Alex already? He's always loved me. If it weren't for you interfering back then, we would have been married by now. Even now, you still won't let him go? Don't you have any shame?" Emily's workplace was nearby, so she had probably just finished work. How fitting. What cruel fate it was that the three of us should run into each other here. Her words quickly drew the attention of people around us. I noticed some passers-by whispering, their phones pointed in our direction. "Oh, so she's the mistress," someone murmured, loud enough for me to hear. "How shameless. Look at the wife. She's gorgeous. And this one still has the audacity to cling to him." I clenched my fists tightly, trying to hold back my anger. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't. I raised my hand again and slapped Emily across the face. This slap carried all the fury I had been suppressing. Emily was stunned, her eyes wide as she processed what had just happened. Then her face twisted in rage, and she lunged at me, shouting, "How dare you hit me? Do you even know who I am?" In the past, I would have held back instinctively, because I loved Alex. I didn't want to upset him. I used to believe that if I stayed by his side, treating him well, he would eventually see me. Maybe in 5 years. Maybe in 10. But now I understood. Moving myself wasn't enough to earn love. Love is selfish. Alex loved Emily, and she didn't have to do anything to earn it. She just existed, and he held on to her in his heart for years. Meanwhile, I had humbled myself to the point of being invisible. But he didn't love me and never would. I grabbed Emily's wrist tightly, my voice low and deliberate. "First of all, I didn't interfere in your relationship," I said coldly. "You two had already been broken up for a year before Alex and I got together. Secondly, we're still married. Legally. If anyone's interfering in someone else's relationship, it's you. Lastly, I don't understand where your arrogance comes from. You're just a mistress ruining someone else's marriage. And yet you dare to talk down to me, his wife. Is this what you call dignity? If that's your idea of dignity, then I'm afraid I'll never learn it." My degree was in law, and the angrier I got, the more articulate I became. The crowd around us was stunned. "So she's the mistress," someone muttered. "How bold. Acting so righteous when she's in the wrong. Post it online." Another whispered, "Mistresses like her deserve to be exposed." Emily glanced around, biting her lip hard, her jaw clenched. But when she turned back to Alex, her face transformed into one of pitiful fragility. Tears welled in her eyes as she clutched the hem of his jacket. "Alex, she hit me. Are you just going to stand there and let her hit me? You love me, don't you? Tell her. It was her interference that ruined us." I let out a cold laugh. "You can stop with the act. I hit you. If you have the guts, let him hit me back for you." But Alex said nothing. Under Emily's shocked gaze, he pried her hand off his jacket and said calmly, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. The person I love is my wife. I have no intention of getting a divorce right now. I'm sorry, Emily." Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. She took a step back, her voice trembling with rage. "What about everything you've said before? You told me you couldn't let me go. You kissed me. You spent my birthday with me while she was in the hospital. And now you're telling me it was a misunderstanding? Alex, are you even a man?" Alex lowered his voice. "I admit, I did have lingering feelings for you before. But I've thought it through. That was just the regret of unresolved feelings from years ago. These years with Shun have been good. If anyone's at fault here, it's me. I'm sorry. Emily's face twisted with emotion. She slapped Alex hard across the face, her voice breaking as she yelled, "You're despicable." Tears streamed from her swollen eyes as she stormed off. I had no desire to continue being a spectacle for the crowd, so I turned to leave as well. Alex reached out to stop me, but I yanked my arm away. "We need to pick a time to finalize the divorce," I said flatly. He gritted his teeth. "I won't divorce you." I shrugged. "Suit yourself. I'll just wait out the 2 years of separation and file then." With that, I got into my car, started the engine, and drove off, leaving him standing there. Our relationship had turned into a complete farce. I believe Alex genuinely realized he wasn't ready to lose me. Over the years, I had taken care of him too well. Every shirt perfectly ironed, every meal tailored to his preferences, every dose of his medicine meticulously prepared. He never had to worry about anything, big or small, at home. And what about me? He didn't need to remember anniversaries or even my birthday. He knew I wouldn't get mad. But now that I was gone, who else could he find to love him as wholeheartedly as I did? Of course, he panicked. He instinctively wanted to draw a line between himself and Emily, trying to return to the comfort of what we once had. But I no longer wanted to be the fool who waited for him, waiting for him to love someone else and abandon me, only to come crawling back when he was done. I wasn't going to let myself be treated like a dog, tossed aside and called back at will. Lying on that operating table, tears streamed down my face. I had begged so many times, so desperately, for him to visit me, even just once. Just one glance would have been enough to keep me from going insane with loneliness and fear. But he didn't even give me that small shred of self-deception. If I forgave him now, I would be betraying the child I had to destroy with my own hands. I would be betraying myself and all the pain I had endured. What happened that day didn't matter much to me in the end. A few days later, while I was at work, a coworker hesitantly approached me, her face full of unease. She handed me her phone. "Shun, is this you?" Confused, I glanced at the screen. It was a video taken outside our office building, showing me, Alex, and Emily arguing. The video had captured the moment I slapped Emily, leaving her stunned, and the part where I called her a homewrecker. The video's comment section was exploding, with tens of thousands of comments and messages filling the screen. "This mistress has no shame at all. How dare she confront the wife after interfering in someone's marriage? She deserved to be slapped. LOL. The wife is so cool. Love her. Let's wait for more dirt to come out. I don't believe anything yet. Am I the only one noticing how handsome the guy is? He looks better than a celebrity. No wonder these two women are fighting over him. Your morals are as shallow as your taste in looks. A cheating scumbag deserves no sympathy, no matter how good looking." Because both Alex and Emily were attractive, the video quickly shot to the top of trending searches. The backlash was harsh. Emily and Alex became the targets of public outrage, though Alex managed to avoid the worst of it, since he rarely used social media. However, his old Quora answer resurfaced, and people flocked to the comments to call him a scumbag. Emily, on the other hand, faced the brunt of the storm. She loved posting about her daily life on her social media, and this time it became the target of an onslaught of abuse. Thousands of comments poured in, calling her shameless and worse. Panicked, she made the mistake of trying to defend herself. If she had just stayed quiet, people might have forgotten eventually. But instead, she posted old photos of herself with Alex and shared screenshots of their past conversations, trying to prove that they had been a couple before I came into the picture. Unfortunately for her, the internet didn't buy it. "Emily, you're still lying at this point? Everyone knows you broke up with Alex when you moved abroad, and were the one who initiated the breakup. Shun didn't even get together with Alex until a year later. You're so shameless it's embarrassing. Are you saying Alex had to stay loyal to you even after you dumped him? And anyone who's with him now is a homewrecker? Get over yourself." People even dug up an old post Emily had made after her breakup, where she had written, "Love can't survive distance. When I needed you, you were never there." That post confirmed that their breakup had been due to their long-distance relationship and had nothing to do with me. The drama escalated further. Emily's arguments with commenters only fueled the fire. She was soon labeled the most shameless mistress. And her personal information was exposed online. People discovered that her college thesis had been plagiarized, which forced her university to revoke her degree. Her high-paying job also terminated her contract under public pressure. In a matter of days, Emily became a public pariah, despised and ridiculed by nearly everyone. Alex, on the other hand, managed to keep a low profile. Aside from some initial backlash, he faced little consequence. He even had the time to change his number and call me again. Emily has paid the price. You've been vindicated. You got everything you wanted. Shun, come back, he said. The thought made my stomach turn. I hung up immediately. But Alex became relentless, repeatedly calling and bothering me. It wasn't until 3 months later that he finally stopped. I thought he had finally given up. But then I received a call from his secretary. Mrs. Shun, Mr. Alex is refusing to have surgery. Please come and convince him. First, I thought it was just another one of his tricks to get me to come back. But the secretary's voice was trembling. Mr. Alex has stomach cancer. It's already in the middle stages. The doctor said if he doesn't have surgery soon, it'll be too late. Please, come quickly. Shocked, I hung up the phone. After hesitating for a moment, I decided to go to the hospital. When I arrived, Alex's secretary, pale-faced, greeted me. Ever since you left, Mr. Alex has completely flipped his days and nights. Sometimes he remembers to eat. Sometimes he doesn't. He stopped taking his medication too. He doesn't sleep at night. He just stands on the balcony, smoking for hours. His stomach had always been bad, and now it's gotten worse. He's been breaking out in cold sweats from the pain, and then he started vomiting blood. Today, when he came for a checkup, they confirmed it. Stomach cancer. It's already advanced to the middle stages, but for some reason, he's refusing the surgery. He insisted I call you and ask you to come. I entered the hospital room to find Alex sitting by the window, staring outside. When he saw me, he turned his head and gave me a faint smile. You came. I hadn't seen him in months, and I almost didn't recognize him. Alex had always been into fitness. He used to be the type who looked lean in clothes but muscular underneath. Now, his tall 6-foot frame had wasted away, his clothes hanging loosely on his gaunt body. I frowned. What are you trying to do? He pulled out a cigarette and lit it, ignoring the no smoking sign on the wall. Taking a deep drag, he spoke, seemingly out of nowhere. Shun, when I wrote that answer, I really meant it. I truly thought I didn't like you, that this marriage was meaningless. I clenched my fists. You called me here just to humiliate me? No, he said, continuing without looking at me. When I saw Emily again, I was excited at first. Back when I was younger, I really did love her. She was beautiful, accomplished, and my equal in every way. I thought I could never get over her. He paused, taking another drag. But something strange happened. After spending time with her, I realized I wasn't as happy as I thought I'd be. I kept comparing her to you. When we ate together, she ordered a spicy dish. And I thought, if it were you, you wouldn't do that because you know I can't eat spicy food. When my stomach hurt, she panicked and didn't know what to do. I thought, if it were you, you'd have found the medicine right away. No, if it were you, you wouldn't have let my stomach hurt in the first place. She's amazing, funny, and talented. But even when I was with her, my mind kept wandering. I couldn't stop wondering what you were doing. I interrupted him, my voice sharp. I was having an abortion. Alex froze, his head snapping up to look at me. After my car accident, the doctor asked if I wanted to keep the baby. I tried to call you, but you didn't answer. Later, I found out you were celebrating Emily's birthday. So while you two were having dinner at the revolving restaurant, I was lying alone on an operating table, killing our child with my own hands. His already pale face turned ashen, the color draining completely. The cigarette burned down to his fingers, but he didn't seem to feel it. He sat motionless, staring at me. After a long silence, he finally lowered his head and took a deep, shaky drag from the cigarette. His hand trembled violently, ash falling to the floor. His voice, hoarse and broken, escaped his lips. That explains it. That's why you won't come back. He exhaled, his tone laced with regret. During the time we've been apart, I couldn't stop thinking about the past. I used to come home, and you'd blush and kiss me. Dinner would always be waiting on the table. Back then, I didn't think much of it. But now, looking back, I realize that coming home used to feel like something to look forward to. What I wanted, I already had it all along. I've loved you for a long time, Alex said, his voice trembling. I just didn't realize it. Shun, I know I've wronged you, and now I understand how deeply I've hurt you. His eyes reddened as he continued. Can you give me a chance to make it up to you? I looked at him coldly. Alex, do you love me? Do you really love me? Or do you just love the feeling of always having someone put you first? Do you want me back because you miss me? Or because you want me to take care of you like I used to? A bitter smile tugged at my lips. The truth is, you've always loved yourself the most. When Emily brought you excitement and novelty, you abandoned me without hesitation to be with her. Did you not know that it would hurt me? Of course. You knew. You just didn't care. Later, when you realized she couldn't take care of you the way I did, you started thinking about me again. Let's be honest. What you've been chasing all along is your own selfish desires. And now, you dare to say you love me? Don't disgust me. His gaze faltered with each word I spoke, his confidence crumbling into silence. I continued, my tone icy. Whether or not you get that surgery is up to you. Legally, we're still married. So if I need to sign anything, I'll come back for that. With that, I turned to leave. Just as I reached the doorway, Alex's voice stopped me. You're right about everything, he said, his tone hollow. I am a selfish, heartless man who didn't deserve you. You gave me everything, and all I gave you was pain. I don't deserve you. He paused, his voice soft and distant. But there's one thing I didn't lie about. I really do love you. I tilted my head back, saying nothing as I pushed the door open. Those words, I had waited so long to hear them, so long that even now, hearing them made my eyes sting with tears. But I would not turn back. I finally understood. Someone who doesn't love themselves will never be worthy of love. The next time I heard about Alex was 2 months later. By then, I had started a new life. I forced myself to delete and throw away everything related to him. Loving him for so long had turned into a habit, one that felt like it was etched into my body. Ripping it out was excruciating. But I had no choice. I had to move forward. Just as I was beginning to forget, his secretary called me. Mrs. Shun, Mr. Alex's surgery was successful, but the doctors said it won't prolong his life by much. We're planning to take him abroad for treatment. He asked me to tell you, knowing you wouldn't want to speak to him directly. He said he'll be leaving the day after tomorrow, but he wants to finalize the divorce with you tomorrow morning. I was stunned. Alex had always refused to agree to a divorce. I had resigned myself to waiting for the 2 years of separation to pass before filing. I never expected him to agree so suddenly. The next day, I saw Alex for the last time. He was almost unrecognizable, a shadow of the man I had once loved, sitting in a wheelchair. He looked so frail that even a light breeze could knock him over. He was no longer the confident, spirited man I had married. He didn't try to argue or plead. Instead, he simply handed me the divorce papers. Take a look. After this, you'll finally be free of me. I flipped through the documents and noticed that he had left nearly all his assets and money to me. I frowned. I don't want this much money. We agreed to split everything evenly. Keep it, he said, his tone calm. I have no use for it anymore. I don't have much time left. He smiled faintly. I gave you so much trouble over the years. Consider this my insignificant way of making amends. Maybe it's true that facing death changes people. Alex seemed like a completely different man. Calmer. More at peace. We finalized the divorce without any issues. As we walked out of the civil affairs office, I couldn't help but feel a pang of nostalgia. It was in this very building that I had once married the man I had loved for so many years, full of hope and joy, believing we would be happy forever. But in just 3 short years, everything had changed. I'm leaving now, Alex said, clutching the small notebook in his hand tightly. He gave me a small wave. I wasn't sure if I was imagining it, but his eyes seemed to glisten with a faint redness. Tomorrow, I'll be heading to the U.S. I don't know if we'll ever see each other again in this lifetime. From now on, take good care of yourself. I should have hated the man standing before me. He had left me battered and broken. But at this moment, all I felt was an ache in my chest, a bitter sorrow spreading through me like a dull ache in my mouth. Goodbye, he said as his secretary pushed his wheelchair away. Even as he left, he turned back to wave at me one last time. Shun, I hope you'll find happiness. I wiped at the corners of my eyes, forcing myself to hold back the tears. In the end, I didn't say a word. I had already said everything there was to say, both the things I should have said and the things I shouldn't have. All that was left now was silence. Perhaps, for the two of us, this was the best ending. Let this be where our paths diverge. Let us move forward, each on our own. I turned and walked away. We walked in opposite directions, growing further and further apart until neither of us could see the other anymore. The sunlight today was brilliant, so bright it stung my eyes. I walked on, my vision blurring as tears welled up, but I wouldn't look back. No matter how much it hurt, I would keep moving forward. In my heart, I whispered, goodbye, to the first half of my life. Goodbye, Alex.